Hello everyone, Ernest Heaviside here. I'm just doing a chatting stream this time. I think my last chatting stream with no background music was one of the best streams I did, and so I'd like to replicate it. Um, I want to just talk about things that I'm interested in, things that I'm thinking about, and there's a lot of them. So that's a cold opener right there, isn't it? There's no follow up from that one. You're serving a cold dish on a plate there. Um, One thing that I was thinking about is because last time when I streamed, I had to do my workout like in the dark after the stream, and so I was thinking about fearing the dark and like what my fears are. And believe it or not, I used to be afraid of the dark at one point in time. I think, of course, everyone is. Um, but at a certain point, at a certain point, I started to realize something. I started to realize that the reason people fear the dark is because of me. It's because of me. It's because, a young, strong guy might be lurking in the dark. That's why people are afraid of the dark in the first place. And so once I realized that, it was like a switch had flipped, and I was suddenly all of my fear of the dark vanished overnight. And I just never was afraid of the dark anymore. It was just like daylight, but a little bit more inconvenient because you can't see as much. Yeah, I don't fear it at all anymore. One of the fears that I do have is a fear of heights. And I have attempted to challenge this fear many times, intentionally going into situations or places where I will be afraid of heights. And I have never conquered this fear. It seems to be instinctual. I don't know if all of my ancestors were falling off cliffs or something, or like jumping out of airplanes, why I would instinctually have such a strong fear of heights. But that is actually the only fear I have. Well, maybe if I was confronted with a vicious bear, maybe I would be. I don't know. Maybe I would be, but I don't think so. I don't think so. I just never had that fear at all. Yeah, in one of these old sci-fi stories that I used to read, there is an entire like drama about the fear of space, like how lonely it is in space, and how people going up into space, just when they come back, they're no longer quite sane. They lose some of themselves up there. And in particular, there was a story about a guy who was on a station like around, I think it was Pluto. He's at some kind of like installation there, and his job is to like monitor it, and it's a teleportation device. So there's like this giant like array of devices that like beam together and create a teleporter, and his job is just to turn it on and off. And he was all alone. I don't know. I mean, I guess the story was about the fear of being alone. So they made him. I mean, obviously in real life, they wouldn't let anyone work that job alone. But he was all alone, and he had nobody to talk to, and nobody to console with. And so the story is just a series of journal entries of this guy getting increasingly paranoid and increasingly kind of disturbed mentally. And he starts to hallucinate things and see things. And one of the only things that calms him down is when he turns on the teleporter. It's like this massive teleporter that could take entire spaceships into its center. One of the only things that calmed him down was turning on the teleporter and watching like the static pattern of of all the um, of all the like snapping beams of electricity and the pink fog or whatever is in the teleporter. He would just be mesmerized by it. He would just go out in his spacesuit and just look at it for hours. And at the end of the story, it's revealed that he was like, he was completely nuts by the end, and he was turning on the static pattern when spaceships were passing through it, and he actually like destroyed a bunch of spaceships. And yeah, so I guess it's a common trope in science fiction is just how alone it feels to be out in space, and how just vast it is, and how empty it is. There's nothing out there. It's like there's no light once you get away from the sun. It's just a void, you know, and how isolated we are here. It's almost like we're on a raft in the middle of a giant, deadly ocean filled with acid that's eating the raft away. No, I don't want to be too depressing here. Actually, one common trope in old science fiction that I like a lot is the solar station on Mercury. So typically, when humanity has advanced beyond a certain stage, they build a solar station on Mercury because it's really close to the sun, and Mercury is actually almost tidally locked to the sun. So it's spinning relative to the sun, but not very much. Like a day on Mercury is a very long time, just as our moon is like tidally locked to us. So it seems almost like an ideal location for some kind of solar station to gather energy, and then that energy is beamed back to Earth, like across deep space through some unknown mechanism that we don't yet understand. But that's actually a little bit of a common trope, the solar station on Mercury. And one idea is like, well, if you're beaming the power back and you're off by like by like 1/10 of a degree, maybe you'll just beam the Earth with all that power and just like fry the Earth. Yeah. So one thing that you're gonna notice is that as we get more advanced technology, we also need better socialization, because things become increasingly devastating, right? Like weapons, but also just technology itself. Like a flying car would have the ability to take out a skyscraper, you know? And so as technology advances, you need better social communication between people, but also just better organization and better mental health. And so a lot of like people believe that we can't actually get to a high level of technology until we unify into a single consciousness, to like erase our individual aspects so that nobody can act out and like destroy a planet by accident. So it's like one organism. It would never harm itself. That's one idea. And actually, that's kind of an idea of history, right? A lot of like these leaders of history have attempted to unite big nations together and reduce internal conflicts and project power outwards instead. And it's a similar concept. You're like removing disobedient thoughts, removing disobedient voices from your nation, and then once you've conquered the internal disputes, you can expand outwards. And so that's sort of a microcosm of the same concept. It's like, well, if we erase everything that makes us who we are, then we can advance. Isn't that a wonderful vision of the future? Isn't that just great? And I mean, okay, that's what you want. I mean, it's not what I want, but some people. So, I mean, what is out there really? What is really like out there in deep space? Like, think about it. Like, is it really just an empty void? is that really all it is? I mean, wouldn't that be kind of disappointing? Like, what if there's more out there that we just don't understand yet? That we just don't know about yet? What if there's like an entire sort of like network of people just transporting around the galaxy, visiting planets, or maybe there's like another dimension that we can like travel to? And so one common kind of dichotomy in like technological thinking is, where do we want to expand? Do we want to go outward or inward, right? So outward would be like conquering space. It would be like building a station on Mars. It would be like maybe inventing a hyperdrive and getting to like the Orion Nebula, or like visiting a distant black hole. An introspective version of the future would be more like, we're going to program artificial worlds, and then we're going to like enter those artificial worlds, and then we could do whatever we want in those worlds. We can make all our dreams come true in the artificial landscape of of the computer code. And I mean, I'm not trying to be biased here, but I think you can tell which vision of the future appeals to me more, just in my voice, right? But that's another vision of the future. And in fact, one disturbing thought is like, what if that's what we're doing right now? What if we're in a simulation right now? Like, what if this is all a universe above, if simulation? And maybe like the humans here are those people who like entered an artificial world and wanted to like have fun. Or maybe this is like their afterlife. They're like, okay, well, I've reached the end of my life, so I'm going to enter my consciousness into this artificial world where I can live another life. And so maybe there's like another world above us, right? And that is quite a scary thought. I don't know if I believe in that, but I have to keep my mind open to those possibilities, right? You can't just say, well, oh, it's impossible. I don't believe in it. Well, you need evidence to say something like that. You can't just say that. So you have to, in the absence of evidence, you have to sort of keep your judgment fair, right? Keep your mind open. Maybe it is the case. Who knows? I mean, well, I shouldn't go there. But let's cut the conversation off there. Anyway, I had my workout earlier, and I was a bit I wasn't going at my usual strength, I guess. Typically, as you know, I like to challenge myself a lot. I really like turning up the difficulty to max. I really like going as hard as I can and just really, really challenging myself. And that's actually a bad impulse as an athlete. Because as an athlete, the way you get good, really, is sort of a consistent effort over time, right? You need to put in a fair effort every single day. Or depending on the workout, you know, you're on a cycle like once every 3 days or something. So just every single week, you need to put in that effort. And consistently, every single day, every single week, you have to do it consistently. And if you're doing it like all out every single day, it interferes with your ability to be consistent. And so your muscles are actually like listening to signals from your body that are telling them to grow or telling them to like develop, right? And what they need is the signal. They just need to receive the signal, grow, right? And so you don't even have to send like the strongest signal in the world. You don't have to like work until you're like collapsing. You just need to do a fair effort, and your muscles will get the idea and then start adapting. And it works. It actually works. It's amazing. Like after a couple of weeks, you actually start seeing changes. It takes like a couple months actually for the changes to start becoming like permanent and actually starting to become a part of you. So actually, your muscles have mitochondria, right? And well, all your cells do, obviously. It's the powerhouse of the cell, as you learned in, what is it, 7th grade? But your muscle cells can actually grow more mitochondria, and that makes your muscle more powerful. Like, it can process more energy. It can push harder and stronger and faster, and that's a big deal. And so, if you've been training for a long time, you start to grow more mitochondria in your muscles. And so, actually, it might surprise you that someone who doesn't even look that strong, like who just looks like an average guy, can be tremendously more powerful than someone who's just a normal looking guy, or someone who's a similar looking guy, I should say. And it's because the one guy has more mitochondria. It's kind of an amazing thing. It's like you almost can't tell who the strong one is, you know? But the half-life on your mitochondria is like, what is it, like 15 years or 10 years or something? So once you built that into you, you can access it again later, right? Like a couple years later, you still have that capacity within you. But you have to build that capacity, and that takes a lot of time and effort. And so it takes like a couple years to get really good at something. I mean, to get to like the top levels of something, you need to train for like a decade. But yeah, I think everyone should do it. I advise everyone to train, you know. I think it's just one of those things. And I guess it's kind of, you have to consider that it's kind of, I hate to be like depressing, right? I hate to be a downer, but it's a little bit of a futile effort, right? Because there's always someone that can just like inject themselves with human growth hormone or like dope their blood, and they'll just be better than you, you know? So it's like you'll never be like the best in the world. You're never going to be the number one unless you're into that sort of thing. But please don't do that. Like, don't be that guy, because this is all about your own self mastery, your own self fulfillment, and it's about building yourself to be a stronger person, to be a better person, to be like the best version of you. And so if you're so fixated on being the best, on being number one, then you're gonna fall into that pit. You're gonna be like injecting yourself with human growth hormone, and no, that's not what it's all about. You need pure motivations, not impure motivations. You need to be right of mind, body, and soul, and that is how you'll succeed. So yeah, it's kind of scary. Like what are we gonna have in the future? Like people like transmuting themselves into like other animals or whatever, becoming like inhuman, you know? Like that's actually also a trope in science fiction. Like oh, we need to populate this planet with people, but the people don't suit the environment there. So there's one thing you can do. You can change the environment, right? You can terraform the planet and have humans on the planet. Or another thing you could do is you could like create new bodies for the humans to occupy and transfer their minds into those bodies. And they can live on the planet as like a different species. And that is, once again, I have a preference for which option is superior in this situation. But maybe you can pick up on it. Yeah, I would never want to be anything other than what I am. I think that I just am what I am, and that's all that I am, as Popeye once said. The famous Popeye quote. I get all my philosophy from cartoons. And no, I don't. Actually, I was meaning to read the works of Marcus Aurelius. This is something that, like, everyone has read at some point, except me, apparently. And his philosophy was interesting, right? Because he was a Roman emperor. And so there's actually a couple of books like this. There's like old philosophical works of like great emperors. There's one from like Chinese emperors and stuff, like Confucius and Sun Tzu. And I think there's one from like the Russian emperors. You know, they tend to do this sort of thing. I think even like the ancient Egyptian pharaohs had writings on the wall of their tombs. So you just can't stop these guys from going into their whole philosophical ponderings. So I never really, I was trying to read it, but I just wasn't motivated to read it. I don't know why. I guess because I'm not shopping for an ideology. I'm not like shopping for a philosophy right now. I don't want to change my philosophy right now. So I'm not like looking for inspiration right now, at least. Maybe I'll just keep that on the bookshelf, you know. I'll read it at some point. Yeah, so I really liked the works of Isaac Asimov. He was an interesting sort. He was very, I'd say his major flaw is that he's very arrogant. And he's very full of himself. And he was always trying to like assert that I predicted this technology. Look at how great my like predictive sense was because I predicted this thing. And look at how great I am. And you know, it's kind of not the right attitude. That said, you know, he wrote good stories. I'm sure you've heard of like his 3 laws of robotics, right? So in his stories, like, they invent a positronic brain, which is like an artificial brain that works on like antimatter power or something. I don't think he had like the full idea fleshed out, but the basic idea was like the dynamics between humans and robots. Like, what kind of dynamics would emerge between humans and robots? And so his sort of idea was like, we're going to create the laws of robotics, the 3 great laws of robotics that will stop the robots from killing us, from like going wild. It'll like keep them in line as robots. And I actually want to look these up. The 3 laws of robotics. And so these are almost like, to him at least, these are like laws of physics. They're like iron laws of nature that all robots have to follow. Let's see. So they made a bad movie about this. Please don't watch Hollywood movies of like famous books, because they always are terrible. They're just always worse than the book. They would just misrepresent the book. And okay, here we go. Like that book, The Martian, that was actually a short story, and I actually read it when it was a short story. I mean, it was popular when I read it, but it wasn't like a big Hollywood production yet. And I watched the movie, and the movie was so bad. It was so bad. It was, oh man, it just made me mad, you know. I think they did that with like Dune too. Like Dune is one of the greatest books of all time. And they just made this horrible movie out of it, and it's, please don't watch those movies. Yeah. Hollywood is kind of past its prime, definitely. So here are the 3 laws of robotics. The first law A robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm, right? So this is saying like robots have to act in the best interests of humans. They can't like revolt. And that's the first law. That's the most overriding law. And the second law, a robot must obey the orders given to it by a human being, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. So you can't like tell your robot to kill somebody. That conflicts with the first law. The third law, a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law. And that law, I guess he just put it in there, but that law like never comes into play in his stories. In his stories, it's only about the first two laws. And usually it's about like a conflict between the laws, like how a robot was trying to follow the first law but had to like violate the second law, or like they interpreted the second law, like they allowed a human being to come to harm, but to like save more human beings on the other side. Or there's all sorts of like dilemmas that he set up in his stories, and it was kind of meh. I mean, it's the stories were interesting. I'll admit they were interesting. I don't really like the concept of it though, because I like sci-fi stories that are like about futuristic technology and like a futuristic society, and not like getting like all autistic and obsessive about laws of robotics. That's kind of, I don't know. He had other stories that he wrote, like detective stories, right? And or like a detective would go to a new city, and it was like a hive city, and there was like a million people living there, and he's like a robot murdered someone, and he had to like figure out the mystery of like how the robot violated the laws of robotics to like kill this person. Or maybe the robot was being framed by somebody, like a human. So he was like a little adventure story sort of thing. And so back then there were all these like magazines. They're like sci-fi magazines, like Sci-Fi Weekly and stuff. I don't know the names of them, but they'd publish a bunch of short stories in those magazines. And the short story format seems to fit the sci-fi genre very well. And the reason for that is because sci-fi stories, like, they contain the core of an idea, right? They contain like the seeds of an idea, and then getting the idea, getting like the concept that they're trying to express is the entire like exercise. It's like the entire task. You don't need like a big long dramatic story with like character interactions and a plot line, and you just need the concept, because the concept is what's interesting about the story. And so I really liked a lot of those short stories format, science fiction stories. They really appealed to me. Unfortunately, there were some that were kind of what's the proper word to use? Very overly obsessed with sexual stuff. Let's just put it that way. Yeah. I don't know why sci-fi authors tend to do that sort of thing. I don't know who that's like appealing to, but yeah, I didn't like those ones. Oh man, I keep like you notice like a couple of times in my streams I keep having trouble like typing things, because like I have very, very big hands and they keep hitting my trackpad, and I have like a very small keyboard. So whenever I'm trying to type something, I like accidentally hit the trackpad and move my cursor around it. Oh, the little annoyances. Maybe I should like invent a new I mean, they have computers that are better than this, but yeah. Actually, I've tried to invent things before. like several times actually. And it's never really gone well because, well, I guess I have a tendency, a bad habit of getting too obsessed about one idea rather than like dropping a clearly failed idea and then moving on. I'm always like, I want to make this work. I see it as like a challenge to myself, as like a challenge to my pride or something. So I get too into like one idea. It's a bad habit. And another reason is that there's a lot of smart people out there, and people have just invented almost everything you can think of at this point. Like all the low-hanging fruit is gone. You know, if you want to make your mark on the world, you have to work for years. You have to work for years and study, and you need a lot of dedication. Yeah, it's hard work, you know. So a lot of people are just like, I guess I'm a bit of an idealist in the sense that I want everybody to be the best version of themselves. I want everybody to achieve whatever they can achieve. Um, and so I like it when people are working hard on something, you know, when people are putting effort into to doing something or becoming something. And I kind of have this fantasy of like the garage mechanic who's like an inventor and who like changes the world, you know. He like sits in his garage and he like cobbles bolts and wires together, and he changes the entire world. He like discovers something. It's just a fantasy, you know. In reality, like the people who accomplish things are like engineers at like big firms, and they're working with like a team. I think even in like the late Renaissance period, all those like famous mathematicians who discovered all the math that we use today, I think even they were mostly working with like a team or like a collaboration, you know. It's like calculus, like everyone says like Newton invented calculus, right? But Newton was playing off other people too, you know. There was, who was that other guy? Who was like, was it, no. Well, I don't want to look him up. My computer's lagging a bit right now, so yeah. Oh man, traveling the universe, you know, traveling into the infinite fractal of recursion. I don't think the universe is like a fractal, because a fractal is, you know, it's like a recursive pattern that it repeats, but it also like doesn't repeat. You know what I mean? It's like it's repeating, but then it's like changing a little bit each time. So it's like a recursion. It's a recursive pattern, and it's a recursion is like you can do that in programming. You produce an output, and then that output is fed back into the input, and that produces another output. So it's changing a little bit each time. I don't I don't like thinking about the universe that way. I've always thought about the universe as like sort of hmm sort of hmm, I guess is like I want to think that everything's like predictable. I guess that's like the scientist in me, you know. I want to like be able to catalog everything and like explain everything. I want to explain everything. I want to like learn the mysteries, you know, learn the secrets. But at the same time, it would be kind of boring if everything could be perfectly predicted from like a single formula, you know. But I don't like thinking about the world as like some kind of simulation or procedurally generated object. I like to think that there's some kind of meaning, you know. So a common idea is that this like world is some kind of test, right? It's some kind of like set up for us to test ourselves, to like achieve a certain level that we're supposed to rise to. And who knows what that level is? Like every single person who expounds this idea has their own idea of what the perfect level that we're supposed to reach is. But people are like, well, like there's this extremely convenient resource under the ground called like oil, right? And we just discovered it, relatively recently. And so it's almost like, well, the fact that there's such a powerful and convenient resource under the ground, it's almost like we were supposed to discover it, So it's like that was put there for us. It's easy to fall into that line of thinking, even if it's not true. It's easy to think that way, that like things are planned or things have like a plan behind them. I guess that's also the thinking behind fortune telling, right? So it's not the most scientific way to think, I guess. Yeah. Did it really start like with a big bang? Do you really believe that? I don't know. I don't know if I believe that, because what they're doing is they're like extrapolating backwards so far in time based on like the current version of the universe they see around them. And it's like, well, is that really the right thing to do? Does that really work? Like you're extrapolating back like billions and billions and billions of years based on what you see around you today. Maybe, maybe. But I'm holding some skepticism, I like to be the skeptic, to be like the contrarian in the room. I guess that's one thing that like I said in my debut that I wanted to bring a level of like masculinity and testosterone into the world of science. I think I'm uniquely qualified to do that, And I sometimes people are like, well, what does it mean to be a man, What is a man like supposed to be? And everyone has their own sort of ideas about that. But to me personally, a man sort of speaks up, A man sort of objects to things, and he's forceful, He's strong, so that's how I like to sort of project that. It's masculine energy. And so I think that's important in the world of science, We need those voices speaking up and saying, turning over the tables, so to speak, and just, raising a controversy, getting in the weeds a little bit, challenging the old status quo, being a rebel. I'm definitely a rebel, Yeah, I'd rather avoid talking about like my personal life and my personal philosophy. I like playing with concepts, sort of like introducing concepts and ideas, but I don't want to like tell someone how to think or like getting overly personal with like my personal life. But I will just say here that I have gone through some things that have like helped me develop my worldview. So I'm I've developed a little bit as a person. I'm like a flower in bloom. That's not the most masculine way to put it, huh? That's not. A man shouldn't describe himself as a flower in bloom. I'm like I'm like a sword in the sheath. I'm like a I'm like a gun in the holster, you know. I'm like I'm primed and ready, you know. I'm ready to do battle. um, yeah. I'm like a golf club, and I'm about to hit the ball. I'm like about to take my swing. Watch me swing, and watch me score a hole in one. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. So Asimov, there was other great like sci-fi writers besides Asimov, and one of them was like Arthur C. Clarke. I never could get into his stuff. For some reason, his writing style just it didn't fit me very well at all. And so I read like 10 or 12 pages of his book, and then I just kind of lost interest. I could sort of see the narrative that he was setting up, and I wasn't willing to go through the motions of it, you know. Yeah. Actually, there's this one Asimov story that comes to mind. It was about two like rival scientists. So one of my themes is that rivalry can drive you to new heights, right? So if you're like having a healthy rivalry with someone, you can sort of hate them a little bit and like push off at them, and but that just drives you to new heights, and then they can do the same with you, and you could both reach new heights together. It's almost like the scientific process of critique and hypothesis and critique and hypothesis. You know, you're driving each other to new heights. But um, there's this one sci-fi story that's about that. It's about two like it's an Asimov story. It's about two like warring scientists. They're like both inventing things that like undermine each other's inventions, and they're both like backstabbing each other at every turn. And I think it was kind of like it was supposed to be like Edison and Tesla or something like that. You know the story of Edison and Tesla. They're like inventors trying to like warring with each other over patent rights and stuff like that. And I guess Edison won that, but mm, Tesla's like the dark horse that everyone remembers fondly and was like, oh man, if only Tesla had won that. But anyway, so it's kind of like an Edison Tesla dynamic, and I think it comes down to like a pool match, and they're like they're like testing this guy's new invention. Um, it's like some kind of energy field in the center of a pool table, and he's like, I'm gonna shoot this pool ball into the energy field, and it's gonna like teleport, right? And then the pool ball goes into the energy field, and instead of teleporting, it accelerates really fast, like to light speed, and it goes right through the other scientist and kills him. It kills him, and that's how their battle ended. And at the end of it, everyone was like, "Oh, it's a mistake. Like he couldn't have known that that would happen." But then they examined like the footage. It's kind of like the Zapruder film, you know. There's like a man hidden in the bush, you know. But they examined the footage, and they're like, well, the ball was headed right for him. Like he deliberately shot the ball so that it was headed right for his head as he was sitting by the pool table, and then it accelerated. It's like that's not an accident. That's not an accident. Yeah. Yeah, he liked the like murder mystery stuff, you know. Asimov did. He wrote a couple of other interesting stories, like Nightfall. I think that was an Asimov story. Nightfall. Yeah. Modern sci-fi is just badly written. It's just badly written. We need someone to change that. So yeah. So what would it be like to be like traveling the universe and to come to a distant like star system or a distant planet? Like, and you're like the first one that's ever been there, like the first human at least that's ever been there. Imagine how you would feel. Imagine how like lonely you would be. Like just looking at the light of that star and how like how it's not your own star. When you think about it like that, you think about like, are we ever really gonna do that? Like, it seems like so out of place for human beings to be anywhere except where we are now. To be anywhere except Earth. It feels like a badly placed object in your room. It's like you're keeping your utensils in your bathroom cabinet or something. Your like kitchen utensils. It's like something out of place. Like seeing a human like on a far distant planet. It's like you're so out of place. Like, hmm. Yeah. So maybe maybe what we'll do is we'll just get to a new planet and then we'll like change the planet to be just like Earth. You know, that's a very forceful approach, right? You're like changing the world to adapt to you instead of changing yourself to adapt to the world. But I actually think there's like an interplay there. You know, you have to change too. The world changes to suit you, but you also have to change. You know, you have to like learn from the experience, and it has to like become a part of you. You know, it's like it's like anything. It's like when you're living life and you have a new challenge or a new experience, it becomes a part of you when you work through it. And so you've changed for the better, hopefully. But you've definitely changed. Um, so this experience of streaming has changed me. Well, to some extent. I wonder how it's changing me, but yeah, I think it's I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing. I think it's like upgrading my speaking ability. It's kind of like adding to my repertoire of talent. You know, I don't know if I'd ever want to be like super popular, but maybe maybe someday. Who knows? Maybe. Hmm. Yeah. So I think I told you last time that I watched those videos of like flying through a fractal, the Mandelbox videos, and I actually had like nightmares about it because it seems so just desolate, just to be in an infinitely repeating pattern. It's so like hopeless, you know. I want to believe that there's hope for this world. So I want to look outward. I want to be on the moon. Actually, I've actually I've actually declared that I am going to be on the moon one day. One day in the future, I'm going to be walking on the moon and looking down on all of you, or looking up at all of you. One day, I'll make it happen. I'll buy my rocket ticket. You know. I guess if you're the first person to like step on a new planet, you get to name it, right? Or like the first words that you speak will be like the first words ever that will be like constantly associated with that planet from then on. It would be like, yeah. So you could say something really ridiculous. You could say like some dumb meme and have those words like on a plaque forever. But no, I want it to be like a profound experience, you know. because we're not. I think the world of like memes and like, I think that's more introspection. You know, that's like we're going inward. We're diving into the world of like the internet. We're diving into the world of inside of our own minds, what we want to build for ourselves inside of our own minds. But going outward, going into space, that's like the opposite of introspection. I don't know what you call it. Outrospection, exploration. Well, I guess just exploration, right? And so to me, it's more of a profound experience. You know, it's more of it's more serious. It's more like meditation. You know, oh, meditation is inward. But I don't see it as like a trivial thing. I see it as like a very solemn experience. And I guess, yeah. One of the stories was these guys on Mars. They're like, they're trying to get, they're trying to like launch their spaceships to like travel the solar system, just the inner solar system, you know. But they need water from Earth to do that. And so the people from Earth like freak out. They're like, well, like when you launch your spaceships, the water is lost forever, right? Like it's gone from the planet. And you're like reducing the mass of the Earth. You're taking water from our precious ecosystem. Like our sea levels are going to start dropping if you keep taking all this water. And they were like doing the math to show that like even if we launched like 10 times as many spaceships, it wouldn't change the sea levels by like even 1 inch. So, but anyway, they were like heroes. So they like went out and to the rings of Saturn, and they got a bunch of asteroids out there, or icy asteroids from the rings of Saturn, and they brought them back and like used those to launch their ships instead. And so actually we're going to start getting into that like in the future. Asteroid mining. Yeah, it's $1 trillion industry in the making. So yeah, we're going to be like hauling asteroids back to Earth and like mining them one day in the near future. And that'll be quite the job. You know, to be an asteroid miner. Imagine having that on your resume. Man, you think your job is hard. I mine asteroids for a living. I mean, I'm in a spacesuit. Yeah. Interestingly, like the comets that landed, or I guess the asteroids that crashed to Earth, like meteorites, I think they've done like carbon dating on them, and they found them that they're like the same age as the Earth, more or less, like 4.6 billion years. So I guess the presumption is that our entire solar system was produced at like the same time, out of like the accretion disk of the star. I mean, that's probably what happened, you know. The math of like a star is actually a little bit interesting. I shouldn't go into math too much for like a stream, but it's something that interests me, and I like talking about it. So I suppose I should just talk about it, you know? Why not? Well, the thing is, the star has like a thermal profile, right, from the radius outward, and you have to start with like the thermal profile before you get your density profile of like how dense the gases are in like the core and then outward from the core. There's like a density function, right? The density function depends on like the temperature function, and they like depend on each other actually. And there's no way to like start from zero and then come to like an answer. You have to like start with a thermal profile and then build your density profile out from there. And so it's sort of it's a little bit of a guesswork in that respect. It's sort of like you start with a model and then, you know, yeah. And then you build your entire thesis out of that model. That's like a bad tendency, you know. When you start with like a single model or a single axiom and you build your entire thing out from that single idea, because what if that idea is wrong? You know what I'm saying? Like, what if that idea isn't actually right? Then your whole thing comes tumbling down. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of instances where that has been the case in like history, and I think it's the case right now with certain entire disciplines of like science. Like, you know, string theory, it's based on that sort of thing where they start with this premise, this singular idea that like that all forces come from the same original source or something. And they try to build a model around that. They try to build out from that, and they get this insanely complicated theory that involves levels of math that nobody understands. I don't even understand. I attended a few of their conferences and I was like, what is this stuff, dude? Like, nobody knows what this is. Like, what is brain theory? Brain theory? BRANE, brain, you know, it's like it's supposed to be like another dimension that exists sort of below ours or something like that. Like, string theory says that our entire universe is like 42 dimensions or something. I mean, there's different models, of course. Different string theorists have their own idea about that, but imagine like imagine like misinterpreting a concept or twisting a certain word, and that changes your entire formulation of the entire universe. Like, does the universe have 20 dimensions or 50 dimensions? Find out today based on what dream I had last night, you know? Based on what my model said, based on my own sort of presumptive attitude, presumptions. Mm. No. Yeah, theoretical physics is kind of it's not been the best. It's not played out the best, you know, to a large extent. Like, there's a lot of good theories, but these days everyone's trying to push the boundaries to get grant money or whatever. And so they're coming up with like crazy theories like brain theory. And you have to stick to the evidence, you know, you have to stick to what the evidence supports. You know, we're evidence-based thinkers. Yeah. That's outrospection again. Have I just coined the word outrospection? Outrospection is like you're examining the universe and taking it in. And introspection is more like I'm gonna like dive into a fantasy world and create my own universe. That's introspection. And that's where we're headed right now. We're going introspective. Now everyone's on the internet getting their content, you know. And they're not like, and then you look at them and they're like a physical wreck. They're like overweight, and they're like they're wearing like baggy clothes. They're like stained. It's like, you know, you're a little bit too introspective there, buddy. It's like you're in your own head, you know. You got to get out there. You got to like put some work into yourself, you know, in the real world, you know, in your real body. Because you can be great, you know. You can be so great. You don't have to retreat from the world and create your own little like fantasy. you can be fantastic on your own merits. And actually, it's interesting. So I am, well, I don't want to like brag about myself, but I'm a bit attractive, right? So I have a lot going for me, but I've noticed that a lot of like people who are not even like attractive, they're like they weren't born with the best physical gifts or whatever. But if they put enough work into themselves, they can become someone like truly enigmatic, truly like great. And I've seen that a lot of times. Like I've seen like these guys and girls who are like they don't look like they'd be much, they look like they'd be like someone very humble with humble circumstances, but then you hear them talk and you see like the way they present themselves and it's like, whoa, this is great. This person is fantastic. This person is like they're amazing, And it's like they built that for themselves. They put enough work into themselves that they became something great. They emerged and they became someone truly spectacular. And at that point, it doesn't matter what you were born with, I guess I can't say that. Like, I guess as part of outrospection, right? Part of like outrospection is that you have to acknowledge that. Oh, geez, I just lost the face tracking. Oh, how do I get it back? I can't believe this works. Part of outrospection is that you have to acknowledge that you were born into this world with limitations, you're a human, you were born with limitations. You're not like, you're not anything but what you are. And so you do have to accept that that you were born with certain talents and certain limitations and certain, you're never going to be the best in anything. And who knows, maybe you will actually, but most likely, the world has billions of people. But that's okay. It's okay if you have limitations. It's not about being the best. It's not about being the absolute pinnacle of existence. It's about making yourself the best that you can be. It's about, oh no, I'm going to use the flower reference again. Yeah, that's that. I'm not a flower, you guys. I'm not a flower. Yeah, you can be the sharpest sword in the sheath. So you can be something truly like unique and truly spectacular. And it's a lot of hard work. That's the thing. It's a lot of hard work. So in my like athletic discipline, like I had to accept very early on that I was never going to be like an Olympic champion, That was hard to accept, for a kid. You have to accept that. But I just wanted to be the best that I could be. And that's the attitude that I have. Oh man. Speaking about introspection and outrospection, I got super introspective there, didn't I? I keep talking about myself. I should talk more about like science fiction or technology, No, well. That I want to say something. I did that chess stream earlier this morning, and I had so much fun doing that. Like, actually, throughout the day, I was actually reflecting back on how much fun that was. And I think what made it so fun for me was the competitive aspect, right? The fact that I was, like, in a battle with these other people. I was actually getting really into it. I was actually, like, enjoying myself a lot. And so I might do that more. I don't want to become like a chess streamer or something. But I think I'm going to do more of those because that was really fun for me. I want to do competitive games, Yeah. All right. Well, I could call it for today. There's not really that much more that's on my mind. It is interesting how, yeah, I do have enough on my mind to to be able to talk extemporaneously for over an hour, about just random stuff. I think I have a tendency to get a little bit too mm, well, anyway, there's more introspection. It's not outrospection. It's a different word, because it involves introspection, because in order to be the best that you can be, you do need a little bit of introspection, You do need a bit of that. So I should come up with like a word for it. I'll write my own, like, like how Marcus Aurelius wrote his work, or like Confucius. I'll write my own, like, treatise or whatever, of my own, like, philosophy. I don't know. Yeah, so today was just, I wanted to just chat, because I thought that was a really good stream that I did before when I was just chatting. And I might just do this more, Playing games is fun and all, but I really like chatting too. Alright, well, I mean, I should send you off with some encouraging words, like, or like a homework assignment, right? I'm a tutor, right? So that should be like, okay, I want you to do like 10 math problems and 50 push-ups. You guys, you're improving yourself now. 10 math problems and 50 push-ups. So, all right, you guys, heavy side out.